Hello, I'm State Representative Rosemary Brown, and welcome to this edition of Legislative Report. Our area in the 189th District consists of many private residential communities with their own governing boards, commonly known as homeowner associations. Sometimes the role of homeowner associations can blur with that of their local government. And I can attest to our viewers that many of the questions I receive in my district office regarding homeowners associations often involve issues that belong more on the township level of government, and we try to, as best we can, to steer people in the right direction and to help them get the answers they need. But here to discuss this topic is my guest, Elam Herr, the Assistant Executive Director for the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors. He has been with the association since 1976 and has extensive knowledge in the township form of government. Mr. Herr, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. And I decided to ask you to join me for the legislative report because of the vast amount of private communities, as I mentioned in the introduction, that we have in my district. And private associations started really in the northeastern region of Pennsylvania, from what I'm aware of, and they just grew and grew. And there has been so many issues that have come with the relationships that the private communities have with the people that live in them, and then also with the local governments, townships, the counties, and the state. So my goal today is to try to just give a little bit of clarification. We don't have a lot of time, but give a little bit of clarification to the people watching on how the communities work, specifically, since you're the expert with the townships, and just try to clarify for people how on a daily level different situations work. So I'll give you a second to give a little bit of input on that, and then we might just go from question to question.
Fine, that's no problem. Well, first of all, you got to keep in mind that the form of government is your local government, be it a township, borough, whatever. The homeowners association is a private corporation, a private company. So although the two can work in conjunction with each other, there are actually two separate entities that can at times work against each other. From the local government's perspective, everyone that's in, and let's say a township in your district, every citizen that lives there is a citizen of that township. They have the same rights, responsibilities, obligations as any other citizen, whether they're in a homeowners association or they just happen to have a home on a piece of land. Those that live in the homeowners association, in that land, whether it's a gated community or not, because you can have homeowners associations without being a gated community, they have, when they purchased that property, basically signed a contract with the homeowners association to say they're going to follow the rules and regulations of that association, which could be totally different than what the rules and regulations are for the local government. And that's where sometimes the conflicts come in. Also, as we discussed earlier, when you have a gated community, that even puts more restrictions on those people. And some people are going to say, why did I use the term restriction? Well, once you go into like a gated community, it's a private community. And there's a gate there, and that gate separates those inside the gated community from those outside. The people who live in those types of communities a lot of times will say that the local government isn't providing us any services, but we're still paying taxes. Yes, they are. The difference is, once you've moved into the gated community, certain things transpire. One is the roads. That's the easiest one you can see. That's the one you see municipalities maintain. All of a sudden, it's like, well, the township stops up the gate. They won't come in and do our roads. The reason? A lot of times, those roads, when the developer developed the property, were not put to township specs, and which are statewide specs. Two, the private community doesn't want the municipality in there. The municipality does not have the free access. The other side of the issue is that gate keeps me from coming in. So that road truly is not a public road, and by law, the township is not allowed to spend public money on a private road. It would be the same as if the township would come to somebody's farm that has a quarter-mile lane and taking care of their lane. They're not allowed to do that because it's private. So those are where some of the issues come into play. The other issue that people say is, then why do we have to comply with the township's regulations? Well, they're state laws. The township has to abide by them. The citizens have to abide by them. You'll take land development subdivision. A lot of the areas up in your district, the townships have zoning, and that when that development was laid out, it met the minimum requirements of the township ordinance. If the homeowners association wants to go the next step and make it more stringent, they have the authority to do that. A good example would be, just in a normal situation, a township has a development or allows land to be developed with 1 acre or quarter acre lots. So literally, it's a quarter acre. In that quarter acre, there's a building envelope. You have to be within that envelope. So you could be at the minimum distance from the road, or you could be at the maximum, as long as you met the requirements. Homeowners association could say, yeah, this is a quarter acre land use zoning. We wanted a half acre. So that creates more problems, but you signed on the dotted line when you moved in there.
And I think that's an important point that, I said to you before we started the show that most of my life I have lived in a private community within the district, with give or take an exception of my first home and a few years of education when I was out of the area. But I'm very familiar with the private communities and what it's like to live in them and what you have to comply with and the struggles and what I hear a lot of residents say. But I think that that's a key point to remember, and it's not always maybe understood as much at the time of a closing, that this is the relationship that you have where you've purchased the house. You are in a private community, and you have really, you wanted that private community for the fact that you wanted those specifications to know that you would have certain size homes or certain color homes next to you, or you would have certain amount of land, and you would have a gate or not a gate or whatever. So you said, I want to be private and I want private decisions to be made. But one of the points that I thought you brought in that was really good was that the road specs, if we take you back to the beginning of your comment, the road specs, that comes up a lot with the township not having any part of the responsibility of the roads, but the private road concept and the specs of the roads. Many of the private communities' roads are not to spec, and if there was a consideration by the private community to even consider bringing the roads up to spec, a lot of them really can't afford that cost, because a township would never, and correct me if I'm wrong, the township would never even consider taking over, or really legally couldn't take over the roads of a private community if they were not up to the state specs.
That's correct.
Right, and that expense for a private community to bring up those roads to a spec is extremely expensive if they were not.
You're correct on both accounts, and there's a couple reasons for that. One is if the township would take over those roads and bring it up, then all the citizens would have to pay to bring those roads up to it. Second thing is, if you don't bring them up to the specifications of the township, and the township takes them over and there's an accident, there's a liability issue that comes into play. And you can guarantee that if somebody's in the accident, their attorney is going to first thing bring up, this road does not meet state specifications, and as such, it's the fault of the municipality. And townships, other municipalities just don't want that liability exposure.
Right, in a very litigious nature.
Yes.
The other point that you brought up was the fact that you could be dealing with township ordinances. Correct. As a quick review of your statement, township ordinances and your bylaws of your community. And so sometimes they could have the same, or one could be more strict than the other, and the stricter one really takes precedence. Right.
As far as the township is concerned, the individual has to comply with the township regulations, the ordinances, what's there. If they meet those requirements, the township doesn't care. You've met the requirements. But with that being said, when you live in a homeowners association, their bylaws, regulations get placed on top of the municipal ordinances. So, yeah, you could look across the dividing line of your property and the next one. You're in the homeowners association, the one right next door to you, they're allowed to do something and you're not, because they met the township ordinance, you met the township ordinance, but your homeowners association says, you know, here's another level of requirements that you must comply with.
Right.
Again, I get back, you signed on the dotted line.
Right, right, and that's very important to remember. Whether somebody is happy or unhappy, they have to understand the agreement that was originally done with, within their private community, and enforcing these ordinances and these bylaws. Just as clarification, I think most people do know that the enforcement of community bylaws is by the community's board and enforcement, and obviously township ordinances are done by the township
Correct.
zoning officers. So those are the enforcement levels. So you can't really mix and ask one to do. The township would never enforce any bylaws of a private community.
The township does not have the authority,
Absolutely.
the legal
Right.
authority to do it.
that.
A homeowners association's bylaw is similar to a deed restriction. It's a
Mm-hmm.
good way of looking at it. And under the Pennsylvania legal system, a deed restriction is enforced by those who are affected by it, which means you and I are neighbors. You do something that goes against the deed restriction. It's not the township's responsibility. It's mine to either tell you that you're in violation, or if you want to be stubborn and not do anything, I got to take legal action against you.
Right, right. And we're almost out of time, Elam, but I think you've done a very good job on just a very general clarification of the relationship, and it's not an easy one sometimes, I think, and it gets a little confusing with a lot of the state agencies and with the private communities, but they are very prevalent in the district, and I definitely think it was worth some of the time just clarify a little bit and understand the not so easy, transfer of the roads or whatever it may be, and understanding the signing on the dotted line and what that really meant and what you were looking for as constituents.
One quick thing on that, when people buy their property, whether it's going to be in a homeowners association or not, people have to read those documents. You cannot totally depend on legal counsel or the realtor or a title search company or whatever. You have to read those documents, and they are written in legalese. I'll go there.
Right.
But you have to understand what you're signing, and it's not just a few pages. In some of these documents, there are hundreds of pages. Right. And that can be, it may sound good today, down the road it could end up hurting you.
Absolutely. Good advice for any type of paperwork.
Sure.
Never sign your name on anything until you
Yes.
really understand it. So, well, Elam, thank you very much for joining me today, and we're going to take a
pleasure.
quick break, and the legislative report will return in a moment.
Did you know that the state capitol is not only the epicenter of the Commonwealth's governing bodies, but was once home to 390 preserved Civil War flags? During the war, it was customary for each state to furnish their regiments in battle with flags representing their contribution to the Union Army. After the war, Pennsylvania's military department was responsible for collecting the flags, and in 1872 they were reverently housed in the Capitol. Following the completion of construction on the new Capitol building in 1914, the Civil War flags were moved to the Capitol Rotunda. They were kept untouched in custom-made flag cases until 1982, when the Capitol Preservation Committee initiated its Save the Flags project. Throughout the years, dust and long-term vertical display of the flags had begun to devastate the brittle silk fabric and painted designs. The flags were removed by local textile conservators and were repaired and preserved in storage units that protect the relics from light, dust, and excessive handling. Now you know.
Welcome back to the program. In our first segment, we discussed homeowner associations and how they relate to townships and other local governments. Now I'd like to focus on the role of our state police in protecting these communities as well. I recently discussed this topic with Lieutenant John Clater, and let's take a moment to view that now. I'm with Lieutenant John Clater from the Blooming Grove State Police. Lieutenant, thank you very much for joining me today.
You're welcome.
And, you know, over my term in service, I have noticed that a lot of people come to me and say, you know, questions about the state police, what the state police respond to, and sometimes you'll get, you know, positive, negatives. You know, we all get that. But I thought it would be really important for us to sit down and representing, you know, Pike County on the Blooming Grove State Police and discuss a little bit about maybe how the state police works, just the generalities for the viewers watching, and the difficulties that we have, especially Pike County, with the rural nature of coverage with state police. So first, let's just go on. How many troopers are there? Do you know that off?
Well, the Blooming Grove Barracks has allocated 65 personnel.
Okay.
Of that, approximately 35 are patrol troopers. I have 6 patrol corporals. I have 7 criminal investigators. I have 2 investigative supervisors. I have a weight detail. I have six civilian employees now. And I also have a clerk, so I have that. So it comes out to somewhere around 65. Of those, the patrol troopers that I'm allocated are 35. Now, I'm not at my complement. I'm basically where the rest of the state is. We're running like 7-10% below just because of the manpower issues, which everyone is familiar with.
Right.
But I do get personnel. I mean, we are the, next to the Swiftwater Barracks, the Blooming Grove Barracks probably has the most personnel in the northeastern part of the state.
Right. And it's hard if you look at 35 troopers in the geography that we have,
Yes.
and the response times and the time it takes to get to location. That's tough, 35. Right?
I mean, it does take time. I mean, it depends a lot of, and a lot of time it has just to do with the weather conditions. It'll have to do with the road conditions. As you know, in Pike County, the roads, other than the major roads, are not in the best of shape. And not that PennDOT isn't doing their job, of course, just the fact the roads are small. They weren't built for the traffic. So, you know, when we go to incidents, the guys drive, hopefully, in a safety conscious way, because I don't want to see someone get hurt to go to a call that's not a priority. Of course, it's a priority call. We pick our time up and get there quicker.
Yeah, and you know, I'm an advocate for more state police, so that's a good thing. I'm sure you'll be happy to hear that.
Yes.
But I think most people in the area would like more, because they feel, hey, listen, we are a larger area.
Yes.
Although you hear, you know, Pike County or Monroe County, people don't always think that we're a metropolitan kind of urban area, but we've got a lot of people in this area, and a lot of services that we need from the state police. And one other thing that really comes up a lot is because of the district that I cover in Pike and Monroe, there's a lot of private communities.
Yes.
So a lot of times people will say to me, well, the state police don't come into our community, or they're not allowed in our community. And it's often difficult to explain the situation, because the Private Community Homeowners Association is a very, it's not unique to us, but we're very heavy in this district.
Sure.
It's actually where it started, the concept a little bit here with our vacationing tourism back in the day.
Yes.
But how can you describe a little bit for me on how the state police work with the private communities?
Well, the private communities are a separate entity. They are, and the way I look at them, it's like a private piece of property. If I owned a farm somewhere, the state police or any police can't just come onto my farm if they want. That's kind of the way the private communities are. They're private. Now, we can go in there to investigate criminal activity. We can ride through there if we're requested to ride through there to look for criminal activity. We cannot enforce basic traffic laws because the roads are not PennDOT certified. They're not up to the township ordinances or any of that. We do have the capability to make DUI arrests in most of the communities. Some we can't because they are truly private. Others have what's called a right-of-way through there. So we can enforce DUIs on some of those roads, and it's basically a case-by-case basis depending on how it fits within the parameters of the law.
Right, if there was a connector road.
Yes.
And so it would be case by case. But I think one of the things that's important that you mentioned was, although it's not always, you know, it's very hard with the amount of coverage that we're trying to do across the whole county.
Yes.
But if you were requested to come in for certain criminal activity or to take a ride through, that you would do your best as a force to come through and do that if it was necessary for criminal activity or something. But you, again, have to be pretty much invited in because of the private nature of the land.
Yeah, that is correct. I mean, most of the developments in Pike County basically have an open door policy. If we feel we need to take a ride through for some reason, if we're investigating some criminal activity or they've had a rash of burglaries, criminal mischiefs, or looking for some individual for a reason, they mostly have an open door policy. If we show up, they just will let us come through. There are many that just call us, and we try to go through. We try to do as much as we can with what we have.
Right, right. And again, going back to what you can't enforce, which would be sometimes in the private homeowners association, their bylaws.
Yes.
And things that fall within their rules of the private community, you really don't have any jurisdiction there to
That is
enforce
correct.
that.
I mean, if it's not in the vehicle code, certain sections in the vehicle code or in the crimes code, the Pennsylvania State Police cannot enforce it.
Right.
There are private community regulations. They have to have their own enforcement mechanisms there.
in their private property.
Yes.
Yeah, I think tends to be a very, very common question. Right. And I know the state police have been very good if I've asked them to go through any sort of, development or take a ride if there's been a situation and the community is willing to have them, that they've always responded and have gone in. But the other thing is, too, there's so much happening in the world of state police. But what do you think are some of the things that are becoming some of the hot topics, or some of the things that if people are watching to be aware of?
Well, I mean, we have the same criminal activity that pretty much everywhere else in the world has. I mean, the major things I see as a station commander at Blooming Grove are drug use. We have a lot of drug problems. Heroin is very big in the area. We have the prescription drug problem, people taking it out of their medicine cabinet, maybe their kids taking it, neighbors, someone taking it and using it. We have, the normal burglary investigations that are conducted, criminal mischiefs. I mean, a lot of times people see things, they don't even realize they see something. And if they do see something or concerned, they can always call us. If they have information for something they think might be a criminal activity, they can call us. We'll look into it. I mean, it's not the TV world where we're going to look into it that second, but we will look into it. Sometimes it has to go in the back burner. We might look at it a day or two later. Just like drug investigations, people call and they expect to see an arrest that morning, but sometimes they may take 6 months, depending. You have to put enough together to go to court with, and the burden of proof is high in most court cases.
Yeah, and oftentimes you really, if somebody was to call and give you some sort of information, you oftentimes can't reciprocate information back.
That is correct.
Because it is an ongoing investigation, right? And
yes.
So go into that a little bit, because I think sometimes people may feel that things aren't being worked on
Right.
In response to their phone call to the state police, and they haven't responded to me, and I want to know why. And sometimes that can't be information given back.
Sure. If we get a call, if you are the as we call it, the victim of the crime, if they call, there's more information, of course, the victim can get. But we can't always provide a victim with a suspect name. I mean, the suspect is not the accused. When they're charged with a crime, they can get a little more information. If we know who committed a crime, we can't call them and say, well, this is the guy we believe committed the crime, but we can't arrest them. They have a right not to give their name out. They're only a suspect. If it's a person who gives the tip, most cases we won't tell them anything back, mainly because of the nature of the sensitive investigation going on at that point. And I mean, when most things come to fruition, if we make an arrest, they'll be able to get that information just from the legal means of the newspaper. A lot of information's in there.
Yeah, and that's interesting, and I think that's sometimes difficult for people to understand.
Sure. I mean, if people have their own particular case and they would like to call the investigator on that case, they can call. A lot of times the investigator can tell them a lot of information, more than a normal person would know if they're the victim. They may have information about, well, did you see this guy, neighbor, those type of things. But, the victims always have a right to call and ask about their case. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a difference between calling and asking and demanding. There's two different things. I mean, you can't always demand something because sometimes we can't give it to the individuals and they don't understand what we're telling them. We say, we just can't give you that information.
Yeah, it is difficult. I know I've run into that myself as well in working with different constituents. What would you feel if you could put your finger on it to say over the last, several years, as far as the changes to the area? I know it's a hard question. It's a very broad question, but being in the position that you're in, what would you feel are some of the biggest changes as a lieutenant?
Well, I would say we have, the Blooming Grove Garrison is kind of unique because we actually have, our criminal activity has actually reduced over the last couple of years. Right. And that I'm going to attribute mainly to the fact my investigators and my patrol members have really arrested a lot of people. We have had groups of individuals that were committing a lot of crimes. They were arrested, and those areas the crime has kind of stopped other than minor things. So I think we're unique to that area, but I believe we've made a lot more DUI arrests. Our DUI arrests are through the roof. More people appear to be driving under the influence. I think that's the fact that they believe that they're in a rural area and the police aren't going to be there. And they get arrested for it. I mean, we don't give breaks on that. That's a crime. We're going to arrest you for it. I lived in the area my whole life, so I know just the population growth, the traffic on the roadways, where more accidents. People need to slow down. Don't drive quite as quick. You know, if you're trying to get somewhere in a hurry, you know, you'll get there. You just want to get there in one piece.
Yeah, it's tough, and we noticed that down in Monroe County
Sure.
as well. It's become very congested, and the roads were never meant to handle this amount of traffic. There's so many things we could talk about, and I guess, you know, as a lieutenant for Pike, what would you say are some of the biggest differences between Pike and maybe Monroe? Since my district covers both, as a state police, is there anything that you could say as comparison between the two counties? Are there any main differences that you see?
Well, I mean, the main difference I would just point out would be definitely the traffic. I mean, Monroe County with Interstate 80 and the, 611, all the different roads down here, traffic-wise, it's much busier than the Pike County in the traffic area. Criminal activity-wise, I would think that, and having looked at it, the number of crimes reported, the number of crimes investigated, they're pretty close. I mean, Pike County is a lot more than people believe. I mean, of course, the Swiftwater Barracks, having worked there for a while, I know that they're very busy all the time. We have the same. I mean, they're probably a little busier, but they're both pretty busy.
Yeah, we've got active counties, the two
Yes.
of them. A lot of the associations, fire departments, all different type of organizations are doing a lot of work with the youth
Yes.
and the schools. And, you know, are the state police, local state police, doing anything with our local school systems that we should be aware of?
Well, at the present time, with Delaware Valley, Wallenpaupack, and East Stroudsburg being the three school districts, we at one time were doing the SRO School Resource Officer Program at East Stroudsburg. They presently have their own police department. Delaware Valley has their own. Wallenpaupack doesn't. We do work with Wallenpaupack very closely. We make sure we're at the school every day. We go there. If we're called or not, we'll show up there, drive through the parking lot, and go in and talk to the students, the teachers, the faculty. We have the one thing the state police do is our Camp Cadet program. That's a big thing, and we try to get the kids in Pike County involved in that and have them come to the camp to see what it's like to be a state trooper, at least a little piece of it. Get them involved in that. We have, of course, tours of the barracks, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, those types of things.
Very nice. So the Camp Cadet is a one-day program?
No, that's a week.
It's a week?
It's a week, and what occurs there is the person's interested has to be between the ages, I'm going to say 13 and 15. It might be 12, but I think it's 13 and 15. They apply. They're interviewed by a person from Camp Cadet to see why they want to go there, if they meet the qualifications. It's not for disciplinary problems. That's not what it's for. It's for people who might want to be a state trooper or just want to get a feel of what it's like. They come to the camp and they spend a week there. And for that week, they're treated like a cadet at the academy within reason. I mean, they learn a lot about the state police, but they have a morning run. They might get scolded a little bit. They have to clean their rooms. They have to do the same things a cadet would do within reason. And most of the students that have gone through it, the people who have gone through it, like it.
And that's done local?
Yes, each county, Monroe County would have their own. The Troop N area, which is Monroe County, has their own, and we're a Troop R, and we have our own.
Very nice. And I'm sure they just contact the local barracks if they would be interested in
Yes,
doing
if you
that.
were to live in Pike County, you'd call the Blooming Grove Barracks. If you live in Monroe County, you can call Swiftwater Barracks, and the pamphlets are there.
Very nice. Well, Lieutenant, we had a very quick conversation, but I think we got a few points in there that hopefully some of the viewers, they've had answered a few of their questions that are kind of the hot topics. So, Lieutenant, thank you very much for being with me.